Quick video on chord inversions and how to actually work out your own chord inversions when you're playing, as opposed to learning the voicings from a book, which is fine, but it might limit you to what's in the book as opposed to knowing all the inversions of all the chords that you can play. There is actually an overarching rule for each string set as to how these things work. So for example, if I take the E, D, G, B string and I play A major 7 like this, that's 5, skip a string, 6, 6, 5, like that. And I take the first inversion of that up here, which is 9, skip a string, 7, 9, 9, like that. And I look at these two chords and I think, how did I get between them? So what I actually did here is I moved the root from here up an octave, I moved the D string note up an octave, I moved the G string note down an octave, and I moved the B string note to the unison on the G string. So that was up, up, down, and then across, you can think of that, and that gives me this chord. Now the interesting thing about this is that actually that rule set applies for absolutely any chord I pick and anything I invert, no matter what inversion it's in. So if I take, for example, a second inversion minor 7 chord, like this, well, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to move the bass note here up an octave to the D string. I'm going to take the D string note up an octave to the B string, and then I'm going to take the G string note down an octave here to the E string, and then I'm going to take the B string note here to the unison on the G, and that gives me this voicing, which is your third inversion minor 7. That will be D minor 7 in third inversion. So that actually works no matter what I pick. Again, let's pick something slightly unconventional. If I try and invert G over A like this, and I do exactly the same thing, the E string note goes up an octave, the D string note goes up an octave, the G string note comes down an octave to here, and then the B string note goes across to the unison on the same string. So that's here, here, this one, down, and then this one across. And that gives me this chord. So this is the inversion of G over A, which again doesn't really have the same name, because now when we're inverting slash chords it gets a bit tricky, but the sound is very similar. So we can invert these chords now that we might not normally invert. Very useful little technique. There's a rule set for everything like this. So for example, let me go back to A major 7 like this. How do I get from A major 7 here to A major 7 on the A, D, G, B string? So that's going to be from here to here. Now again, you may have learnt these voicings in a book to go from here to here, but what's actually happening here is I'm taking the root note, and the root note's going up an octave to the G string there, and then I'm also taking the G string note simultaneously, and I'm moving the G string note down to the A string. So just as a brief recap, the E string note's going to the G, and the G string note's going down to the A. And hopefully you can kind of see what's going on there. So that rule will invert any chord on the E, D, G, B to A, D, G, B. So that's what we're doing here. We're going between those two string sets, and what will happen there is we will get those inversions no matter what I do. Again, let me pick a different example. Let's pick a B minor 7 chord, different place on the neck. And again, the same thing applies. So the E string note is going to go up to the G string there, and then the G string note here is going to come down to the A string. So then we get this. And that's going to be my first inversion B minor 7 chord. And again, I can come up with another rule set for this. If I wanted to move this horizontally up the A, D, G, B string set, well, now I need to just pay attention to how I get between my chord voicings here. So the next inversion up here would be this. How did I get there? Well, what you can think of is that the A string note is going up an octave again. The D string note is going up an octave again, so we're going up, up again the same way. But this time, instead of going up, up, down, across, which was the rule set for the E, D, G, B, we're going to reverse those two bottom ones. So we're going to go up, up, across, down. So we get this one goes up to here, this one goes up to here, this one now comes across to the unison note, and then this final note here comes down. So we get up, up, across, down, as opposed to up, up, down, across. And that then gives you this, which is then going to be my second inversion B minor 7 chord. And again, that rule set will work for anything on the A, D, G, B string. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm creating these rule sets for how the strings have moved per different string set, and also for how to get between string sets. And that's actually quite useful because it means that you can take the weirdest chords you can come up with and you can think, how do I invert these? And you've actually got a strategy for doing it. So give this a go. There's obviously a lot more rule sets here. We could go with slightly more unusual string sets. We could go with getting backwards from the A, D, G, B to the E, D, G, B, or we could go in any direction really here. But instead of just learning these monkey see, monkey do, try and see how everything's moving together and what you're doing with each note, and then you can apply the same rules to the other chords you learn and then work the inversions out as opposed to learn them from a book. Give it a go.